Hello, my name is Thomas Grell and I'm responsible for operations here at the Calgary AllSense unit. Today I would like to introduce Volume 7 of our Lead Engineering Training Program to you. When you look at the actual presentation, we start off with a safety moment typically. Here we called it a value creation moment or value creation topic. On the slide you will find two hyperlinks to two Dilbert cartoons, and they're quite funny. They explain the the lack of communication between a lead engineer and management. Well, it happens, and especially when you talk about management of change, that can cause you a lot of grief. Then when we go on, we talk a bit about the definition of management of change and differentiate against change management. It may seem as semantics, but we want to make the point that management of change is a core project management activity. You project manage, you manage the change. The next important point we want to make is what are the change drivers? What is causing change? It can be an external change, it can be a client-driven change, or it can be an internal change. The examples I typically use are an external change could be a regulatory-driven change. The government has a new law on emissions. What we're facing here is a new regulation on tailings management. A typical client change is, well, I want to save money in fabrication and construction down the road, so I want you to make a change to your engineering in order to save money for the project overall. And an internal change could also be that we messed up. Let's say we made an original estimate to have two isometrics per line of piping, and now we end up with three isometrics per line. If that is driven by a change in specification, that's fine. It's almost a client change again. But if you had that specification before and overlooked it, well, then you messed up and you have to deal with the consequences. The next important point in the presentation is the group exercise. It's about a client changes his global practices and wants to introduce them onto all his projects worldwide. You are into detail design, and you split your group into 3 teams. Each team appoints a project manager, a group leader, and you want them to deal with this change. The change is supposed to be 5,000 man-hours in its order of magnitude. And you want the team to go back and analyze it. What are the things I have to consider? What strategy do I have? What assessments do I make? What qualifications do I have? What do I need to look at? You put them under time pressure purposely, as in real life and real project life. You give them 10 minutes to do the exercise, and then you give them 5 minutes to present this. The 3 groups are it turns into 3 groups because one team deals with a fully reimbursable project type, the second team deals with a lump sum project type, and the third one with a unit rate project type, because you want to work out these different behaviors. And it's really interesting to see what the feedback is. My experience is the lead engineers, which is the audience, they're pretty good in assessing their own piece of work and even the other engineering disciplines around it. But when it comes to the impact on module fabrication and construction, all the stuff that's down the road, they usually lack. And very few actually came back and challenged the 5,000 man-hours, because often a client comes to you and is very opinionated of what this change should be like. But my first question would be, well, heck, where do the 5,000 man-hours come from? I want to challenge that. Then you see other interesting behavior. Even the people in the lump sum group behave very much like the people in the reimbursable group, while you want to see a completely different behavior. On the reimbursable side, you have the tendency to work very closely with your client, find solutions with him. While on the lump sum side, you're really up against your contract, against your milestones, against the penalty. There you want to be very clever, and you may want to use a major change to recover a delay in schedule you already had. Right? So you want to be clever from that point of view. Anyway, very interesting, and gets the team going, and you have a lot of lively discussion afterward. Moving on in the presentation, there's a very good slide which shows the correlation between design maturity and the cost influence you actually have. That's very important. One example I'd like to get is, let's say you do a major change to one of your layouts. You move a couple of tailings ponds, settlement ponds from the southeast quadrant to the northeast quadrant. Well, if you're in a feasibility study, that takes you a couple of hours. You have one overall plot plan, a couple of engineering man-hours to change the drawing. No big deal. If you're in FEED, yes, it's a lot more effort depending on where you are. You change a couple of detailed plot plans, you change your model, your 3D model, you have it, you change your structural drawings, all the good stuff you develop in FEED. But again, it is man-hours, it is schedule, yes, depending on when it comes, which again could be mitigated with more man-hours, but it's still limited to man-hours. If you're in detailed design and you do that, you change a barrage of drawings. You have all the follow-on disciplines which suffer from this change. If you issued IFC drawings already, your constructors have to change. So put this picture in your mind. If they had already moved dirt, driven piles and poured concrete, they have to jack up the concrete, rip it all out and do it in another spot again. And they have to cut steel eventually on how far you're in. The other point I make when I have the slide is how important it is to segregate these three distinct steps of the design, which is a feasibility study and then a FEED and then detailed design and construction. Very important. Each one has its own purpose, its own definition stage and gate, and you want to be very disciplined in keeping these three stages separated. And even if for some reason that you cannot avoid, you're made to go back into an earlier stage, let's say you have to do a refeed for a certain item, then you have to keep this picture in mind and you have to be disciplined to go through these steps again. The worst position you can end up being in is having to do feeds and detailed design at parallel. Moving on in the presentation, there are a couple of, say, procedural slides. The reason why we put it in, we wanted to link the procedures we have, the local procedures, to the AMEC way. It starts with this pyramid of the AMEC way, then you have the PMP underneath, and then you go into the local procedures, instructions, form sheets, and what have you. I typically do not explain the details of this. I just guide the team through the hyperlinks in the presentation to basically show them that's where it is, that's where you can find it. Please do this after the session by yourself. If you have any questions, come back to us. Lastly, we leave the team, we let the team go with a picture in mind. You know, engineers are great with pictures, be it two-dimensional, three-dimensional. They love pictures. So we have this octopus there. An octopus has a lot of tentacles around it. And it's the same with change. You see something, and yes, you can capture the tentacles of this one octopus, but then when the slides move along, you see a bunch more, a couple of other octopuses coming along, and they all tie their tentacles, they're all interconnected. And that's really the picture we want to let the group go away with. We want them to keep this in mind. You may see something, but there are a lot of ripple effects that you do not see now in engineering, in fabrication, and in construction. What I would like to do now is give you a couple of examples that I usually mention during the presentation. I just give examples of my past, typically pitfalls, stuff that went wrong. So each example has a huge dollar or euro tag attached to it. So please don't fall into the same trap. And I'm sure you have a lot of examples from your local business to add. One of the challenges is to judge the cumulative impact of changes. Yeah, if you have a small engineering change worth 200 or 300 man-hours, you can say, well, yeah, I can do it with the existing team. I can do it within the existing schedule, fine. Then you have another one, and another 10, and another 20. Now, each change, each trend itself does not warrant an extension of time. or even the addition of staff. But if you put them all together, you see their joint impact. Yes, of course. Your staff has to work overtime. That's something you can do. But even with overtime, you want to be careful. It's a leading indicator. You only want to get to a certain limit because you always want to have the ability to have some reserve. If a real hiccup occurs, you want to have some reserves to save your schedule. The other one is the schedule itself. While each individual change has little impact, all of them put together, then you miss one piece, you need vendor data for it, and all of a sudden your schedule is out by a month or two. So that's very, very difficult. You need to be experienced, you need to have an overview of all these changes going on to make a judgment of the cumulative impact, okay? Often overlooked even by real senior people. The other example is more relating to the quantification of the change. It's fairly easy to assess the amount it takes to do a couple of extra lines to add a heat exchanger to the scope, because ideally when you start the job you have a CTR which lists your deliverables, your norms, how many man-hours does it take me to do this piece of work, and ideally, at least on reimbursable contracts, you have sign-off from the client, so you have agreed CTRs. That's what you carry forward into your project. And if you know these are the additional deliverables, the additional work I have to do, you have the man-hours with it, you put this together, so that's pretty straightforward. We're all very good at this. But what about the support functions? All the good stuff, the project engineering, the project management, project controls, administration, accounting, all of this. The typical client reaction is, well, you have a project manager already, you have an accountant in place, so why you're not going to hire an extra guy for adding 500 man-hours worth of engineering. Well, yeah, that's true, but again, changes add up, and at some point, yes, the guys burn more overtime. At some point, yes, you do need to hire an extra project engineer because this new area requires extra attention, right? The other one is changes often occur out of sequence. So they always come a couple of months later. So you have to go back, change your systems, change your setups, your schedule, your man-hour tracking system, and so forth. So it means a lot of additional effort for your support services. Another example, fairly similar, but an example from construction sites. So yes, you add additional scope, additional steel, additional concrete, additional piping, but if it stays within a certain limit, again, the client says, well, do you really need another piping supervisor for it? I can't see it, right? Another safety supervisor and so forth. Again, the addition of many changes, the constructions being out of sequence for that specific piece requires it. So fight for it, make sure you get these extra man-hours and make sure you get these people on the job site. One more point really, be smart depending on your contract type. When it's reimbursable, be aware what your contract type and your contract conditions are. Does the client pay every man-hour? Does the client only pay the approved man-hours through the change? Do you have caps in terms of fixed fee, profit, overhead caps or what have you? Or are you on the other end of the side where you have a fixed price? Between reimbursable and fixed price, you have a huge difference in the documentation it requires and the formality, because you want to cover yourself and we want to protect the company, of course. So be very smart when you do this. Often a client will want to push you into a change, but especially on hard dollars, you have to be very cautious and, if possible, reject it. And that's really the last point I want to make. Yes, change is inevitable, it comes, but the most successful projects I've been on had little change or almost no change. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me, even though I might be far away. Willing to give you any feedback and support. Thank you.